dragon had been defeated. The dragon then turned into a pile of gold coins. It was their first time seeing this many items dropping. Hasumi Ryuuji was leveling up numerous times. He says that the voice was very annoying. He then saw something and was startled. It was a child's shoe, but why was it there, he thought. A mage comes praising him, but he was thinking of something else. The other mages were happy to beat the dragon. Their leader then asks him to join them. Just then he shows the shoes to them and asks whom that shoe belongs to, as judging from its size it had to have been some child. The mages were shocked seeing this. They realized that it probably belonged to the child that they were looking for. Hasumi Ryuuji then tells them to explain the situation to him from the very beginning. All the mages are gloomy. The leader explains that they were on a search quest to look for the missing child. However, in the midst of the search, one of their members was abducted. Most likely the kids were taken by the goblins too. Hasumi Ryuuji asks if they went searching for their companion and the kids after that. They were all quiet. The leader says that they retreated, and they were actually in the middle of escaping the dungeon. Hasumi Ryuuji is mad and asks them why they would abandon their quest and forsake their comrade to run away. One of the mages shouted that it was no joke, and they were not as strong as he was. The leader tells him to calm down, but explains that it was the truth. The dungeon was brimming with monsters that were not supposed to be in a D-rank dungeon. Maybe the Adventurers Guild examination for assigning the rank was done carelessly. He bets that was the case for the goblins too. Individually, the goblins were too many goblins, but they were extremely dangerous in large groups. Moreover, they were trying to lure all of them by taking hostage, which meant that their den was close, and they were not the foes that his party could handle with their current skills. But he then states two things. First, the moment a dungeon rank is discovered to be mistakenly assigned, the associated request is rendered invalid, which means that they did not abandon their request. What they should be doing was to recommend the quest to higher ranks, and second, they were only a group pieced together for this mission and were not comrades in the first place. Adventurers were not heroes nor men of valor. They just protected their own body with their own efforts and looked out for themselves. Hasumi Ryuuji says that he got it. The mage is happy hearing that he got it. But wait a minute, where was he going? Hasumi Ryuuji answers, the so-called Goblin's Den. He asked the directions to it. The mage stops him and asks if he was listening to anything he had just said. Hasumi Ryuuji answers he was. Then the mage tells him not to be reckless. Hasumi Ryuuji says that their decision was not correct and the reason they were presenting was not enough for him to turn back. He goes towards the dragon drop and asks if there were weapon summoning items among them. One of the mages answers that there were only gold coins there. Hasumi Ryuuji says that he understands and leaves. The mage tries to stop him, but he does not listen and leaves. Was he intending to go alone and make enemies of the entire swarm of goblins? The mages are all quiet about the situation. Hasumi Ryuuji thinks if they are close. The children were tied to the pole, crying. The caught adventurers try to tell them not to cry as someone will sure come to rescue them. Just then the goblins turn back. They see that their subordinates were getting beheaded. The adventurer is shocked seeing this. With the cut head toward them, the goblins are all enraged. Hasumi Ryuuji is also ready to fight them. He tells the goblins to come at him if they want to die. The goblins, like swarms of beasts, all come towards him. Hasumi Ryuuji, as a skilled fighter, hurled towards them, killing every goblin that he could on the path towards the hostages kept by the goblins. He then reaches out to the children and the adventurers and unties them. The girl is shocked to see Hasumi Ryuuji. He asks her if she is hurt. She is startled by him and asks who he is. He tells her that he heard about them from her comrades. She asks if everyone is okay. He says that they should talk about it later. And first they needed to get out of there. There were a lot of goblins blocking their path. Hasumi Ryuuji thinks that it was very bothersome. She thinks that if she just had her sword, she might have been able to help him. A sword? Hasumi Ryuuji asks where the sword was. She tells her that she does not know as it was taken by the goblins. Then there was nothing she could do as she did not have any at the moment. They had no option but to do what they had. Hasumi Ryuuji races towards the goblins and tells the girl to protect the children. He then starts cutting the goblins. There was no end to them. The knife also had become useless after being stained with all the blood. Shoot, he had left them alone for too long. A goblin was about to attack them, but Hasumi Ryuuji made it just in time to save them. The goblin had escaped. The knife slid off because of all the blood and fat on it. The goblin then attacks him, but he manages to block it and the goblin flies. The girl asks if he is all right. He tells her that his dominant arm is fine, and he can continue fighting. She tells him it was not what she had meant. He tells her that he would distract the enemies, and while he does that, he wanted them to run as fast as they could. She asks what he was planning to do. He tells her not to worry as he could at least buy them some time. She tells him there was no way that she was leaving him alone and says that she would fight with him. He tells her no and that the safety of the civilians was his first priority. She then tells him that she understood the assignment. Hasumi Ryuuji thinks that it will be quite hard to pull off, but at any rate the goblins were very quick, and it would take a lot of stamina to defeat them. So, it was time to see what lasted longer. His stamina or their numbers. A voice echoes, "Use your magic power." It was the mages from earlier. The girl is happy to see everyone, but Hasumi Ryuuji was confused. Why were they here? The mage tells that he would have an uneasy conscience if they were to leave just him there. Hasumi Ryuuji is happy seeing them. He then turns to the girl and asks what he meant by magic power. She explains that the goblins clad themselves in magic power, enhancing their magic power and their physical abilities. It was extremely rare, but she had heard that adventurers who did not use magic could do it too. He then remembers the goblin's agility and thinks that it is imp. Just then the voice told me that it was possible for him to do that. A screen appears in front of him, and the voice explains that the MP in the stats is the magic points and is the representation of the magic power he had. He then, seeing the fight in front of him, tells the voice that he got it. So, then he clads himself in magic. Seeing this, the goblins were terrified. He manages to knock the zombies out in an instant. The girl thinks that it was amazing as to how he understood how to use the magic power in an instant. He then clads himself in MP. He then hears someone coming from behind. He looks back. The mage notices him as the Goblin King. The leader tells everyone to run away as they were no match for the Goblin King. The Goblin King smirks at them. Hasumi Ryuuji says that he is not running. The goblin then jumps towards him. He also dashes toward the goblin and punches it hard on the guts. He managed to knock out the Goblin King with just one hit. The mages were shocked seeing this. They had never thought that he was that powerful. Even the goblins were shocked to see that and were terrified. Hasumi Ryuuji then comes back with a sword. He gives it to the girl, asking if that was her sword. She says yes and thanks him. The kids come at him, addressing him as Big Brother. They tell him that they were able to bear with all this because the sister had told them that help would definitely come. He pats their head and tells them that they did great. The girl thinks that it was unbelievable. He had defeated a Goblin King unarmed. Who on earth was he, she thinks. Hasumi Ryuuji then kills all the zombies, and they manage to get quite a lot of drop items. One of the mages is healing him while the girl looks at him in suspicion. They then head back out of the dungeon. They reach a village. At the village, the parents come running towards their children. They then brace their children and thank the mages for bringing them back. The mage points at Hasumi Ryuuji and tells them that it was him that brought them back. The parents then, with tears in their eyes, thanked him. The mages then smirk at him, seeing him uncomfortable. The mage then asks him if it was really okay with him, as he kept only a small portion of the treasure and gave them such big portions. He tells them that would not have been able to get out of that dungeon if it were not for them. In that case, the mage then says to him that they would not be able to survive if it was not for him, and gives him a bag of drop items, telling him that money is never a burden. Saying that it was true, he then gladly accepts the items. He then bids the other mage farewell. Hasumi Ryuuji then asks the girl where he could exchange those items for money. The girl tells him that he needed to go to the Adventurers Guild for that, and the closest one to there was located at the dungeon city across the mountains. He then says thank you and starts going. She stops her to ask if he was walking there. He then says that he did not have any money, so he had no option. The girl tells that if it is about money, then she is willing to pay for the carriage. He asks her if she has no obligation to go that far for her. She tells him that it was her way of saying thank you for saving her. He then smiles and says thanks. She thinks of him as a strange person. Despite being a strong person, he seemed a bit off, almost as if he was someone who came from another world. In the carriage they reached a town. The night had fallen, so they stopped at the inn and asked for 2 rooms, but there was one available which accommodated 2 people. Hasumi Ryuuji asks if it is okay. She asks for what? But Hasumi Ryuuji says nothing and thinks if it was normal for adventurers to share a room. The old man asks if they were traveling as a married couple. They look at each other and then look away. She blushes hearing this and says that he was mistaken and that was not the case. Then she asks for 2 separate rooms. The girl says that they will arrive at Redom tomorrow and leaves the room saying good night. Hasumi Ryuuji then lies on the bed and calls the so-called heavenly voice and asks if it is there. The heavenly voice then says it was right there. He tells it something and it says it understood. The voice then says that there must be many things that he wanted to know, but unfortunately there was very little that she could tell. He tells the voice that there was only one thing he needed to know right now. He wanted to know if he could go back to his world back. The voice tells that it is possible, and there were 10 places in this world that could take him back. But he could not reach there unless he conquered a mythic rank dungeon. He then does not think much about it and goes to sleep. The heavenly voice was amazed. Was that all the questions? It says to give some other questions a shot. He tells the voice to quiet down as he was going to sleep. It is the next day. Hasumi Ryuuji and the girl are on foot. She points at the town and says that they had reached the dungeon city of Redom. It looked like a big city. They enter the city. So, it was the dungeon city of Redom. She says that a legendary ranked dungeon lay at the bottom of the large hole in the city. It is said that this city was built by the adventurers that had gathered there to conquer the dungeon. The city flourished thanks to the dungeon. It was bustling with people. What's more, there were many different races there. He tried to call her, but he did not know her name. She notices this and tells him to call her Faria. Hasumi Ryuuji thinks why Faria would not reveal her family name. Was there some kind of odd circumstance that he was unaware of? He then calls Faria. She looks at her sparking, asking what the matter was. He looks to the other side and thinks if it was necessary to address him in such a manner. He then asks her if they were heading towards the Adventurers Guild. She tells him that is right. So he asks her what Adventurers Guild was. She was stunned hearing this. She then starts explaining that as the name literally implied, the Adventurers Guild is an organization that provides support for the adventurers. The contents of the operations it carried out were varied. From quest referral, certification of the adventurer rank, certification of the dungeon to the weapon lending for the adventurer and purchasing and selling drop items. The cohesion of an organization that is spread across all the nations in the continent was incredible, and its influence and power went beyond that of the country. He understood and asked if they were going to buy all those items. Faria, giving the stick food that she bought to him, says yes. But to sell it was necessary to be registered as an adventurer. An adventurer thinks that he will have to explore dungeons in order to return to his previous world. Those were the qualifications that he needed to do, then he would try to be good at it. She then looks at Hasumi Ryuuji and says that he is no less than A rank. He then asks Faria what rank she is in. She tells him that she was still a C rank adventurer. They then reach the guild. There were a lot of people in the guild. Flirting, drinking beer, searching for quests. Faria and Hasumi Ryuuji head to the reception to register Ryuuji as an adventurer. The receptionist then asks if he is able to write. He thinks that he was somehow managing to speak to them, but writing was a whole different thing. He tells them no. She then tells that she shall proceed orally while she takes notes. She starts asking what type of magic he can do. He tells him that he cannot use magic. This startles the receptionist. She tells that to register someone as an adventurer they needed to use magic. Faria tells her that despite not being able to use magic, he was very strong, and tells that he killed a goblin king and a dragon. This grabs the attention of all the adventurers in the guild. She then tells her that he did it unarmed, which makes everyone in the guild laugh at her. The people at the guild then start teasing him as a rich and arrogant person that was ignorant of the ways of the world. Faria gets furious at them for teasing Ryuuji. They tell her that she was being deceived and question if that guy can really beat a goblin kind and a dragon. She tells her that she saw it with her own eyes. He then comes to Faria and tells her to join their party, grabbing her arm. Seeing this, Hasumi Ryuuji grabs his arm and tells him to cut it out. Hasumi Ryuuji then asks if he could not even notice that somebody disliked their presence. This makes the man angry, saying Ryuuji was a trash who could not even use magic. The girl is then terrified, thinking that the man was about to get sliced. The man then calls his team to punish Ryuuji. They then surround Ryuuji. The receptionist tells everyone to calm down. Suddenly someone comes to them asking what they were doing. It was the guild leader. He asks why they were making a fuss in his guild.
Thank you for joining us in this recap journey. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Comment if you have suggestions, want more of the series. Don't forget to share it with your friends. Do subscribe if you want more similar content. This is Universe Nexus, your passport to the immersive realms of anime and manga.